Thank you so much. Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about our work on inscriptions. Yeah, so, but just, yeah, I was already introduced, but just to let you know, I'm a computer scientist by nature. I have vast academic experience with a lot of publications and also experience in the industry, working at Chainlink Labs, Metra Labs, and Kunumi. And I also have taught lecturers for masters, undergrad, and PhD students. So my research interests they rely on social computing. So basically I have a bunch of publications on this space, machine learning, and of course decentralized ledger technologies like blockchains. But then whenever someone asks me, okay, so what actually you like doing? And then I usually say, yeah, you know, socially disruptive technology is my thing. So that's why social computing, machine learning, and decentralized ledger technologies. So in the blockchain space, I've done a lot of interesting work. For instance, with regarding decentralized governance as well. So we have these papers where we show token concentrations, voting costs for on the decentralized autonomous organizations. We also have worked on airdrop as well. So basically, whether the platform conducting the airdrop is actually or not achieving their goals. So all these papers are available on my website. Feel free to check it out. And of course, data paper. So this is essentially, we released last year, actually this year, no, last year, sorry. 1 year of ZK Sync data. We wrote a paper about it describing some interesting analysis that you could do, and also regarding inscriptions, which is the base of this topic. Other than that, I've done a lot of work on the DeFi and VA space as well, with publications on interesting places, let's say financial cryptography and data security, as well as IMC. But today, of course, we are going to focus on this specific paper regarding inscriptions. So let's start. So let me first then start with this plot. So this plot shows the number of transactions issued on those 5 chains per time, which means that, as you can see here, there are some spikes. So for instance, around November 23, December 2023, and even in January, around January 15. So these spikes, they were really interesting, but the thing is, yeah, you know, for instance, here in November 26, it was basically around the time where DevConnect was being run in Istanbul, and I was there. So guess what? I was attending a venue, and then something happened in the in the ZK Sync blockchain. At that time, I was working at Meta Labs. So yeah, I left the venue and just went to the hotel to get my computer and start analyzing what is actually going on, right? So because of these spikes, which is basically, I mean, for instance, around December, we had more than 5 million transactions being issued in just one day. So there were a lot of downtimes regarding these roll-ups. For instance, Arbitrum suffered from these. ZK Sync as well, because ZK Sync Block Explorer was lagging behind, so users, they went crazy, as well as regarding Arbitrum. So, and there are many more other news regarding this. But then, yeah, so there are a lot of these transactions, so we can ask some questions. What are they doing, right? What are these transactions about? Also, who are actually issuing these transactions and why? So for instance, is this coming to an end soon? Because of, I mean, you know, think about it. Roll-ups, they have an infrastructure, and they need to accommodate the execution and process of these transactions. So as much as you have, you need more, it demands more computer resource, which means that probably it can also install the roll-up network. And how much fees these users were paying, right? But then, okay, I started gathering some of these transactions, just a sample of them, and then here basically we have this ZK Sync Block Explorer. I hope you can see this. And then we can see some interesting things. So the sender and receiver are the same. Interesting. Why is that? So also they are transferring 0 Ether. Again, why is that? So let's check other transactions and see if they have some similarities. Again, same thing, same issuer and receiver, 0 transfers. It's strange. But then one thing I noticed is that they have the same input called data. So what is this about? So yeah, we could basically convert this hex code back to ASCII, and then surprise, we have kind of a JSON format file written to the blockchain. And we are talking about a lot of transactions. Essentially, with this approach, we can also filter all these transactions following that pattern, which is this 0x64 and so on and so forth, that basically translates to data double column, which means that we can filter among all the transactions available, those that match this pattern. And these, I basically, after some digging on some websites, I got to know that these are essentially inscriptions transactions. But what are inscriptions? So some definition here. Basically, this trend originated as ordinals in Bitcoin, right? And of course, it basically reached EVM chains. They are essentially inscribed data or arbitrary data that is written, that people are writing to the blockchain, right? Typically, of course, they are written in the transaction input called data. And so you could basically have JSON format files in the case of token inscriptions, which is the base of this work, as well as images, name it. You can encode everything there, right? They are typically encoded in the transaction input called data in hex format, of course, and they do not rely on any smart contract. Remember those two transactions I showed? There was no smart contract being called, right? And then some key operations that they have, you can basically, for instance, deploy an inscription on the network. So you need just to write this deploy command. That's what these inscription companies were doing. And here are some examples that you can see. For instance, here we have the protocol ZRC20. It reminds us some ERC20, right? The deploy operation, the tick sync, which is kind of the token's name, as well as the total supply and the maximum amount of inscriptions you can claim per transaction. And by claiming, of course, there is an operation for that. So whenever you as a user wants to claim some inscriptions on the blockchain, you could basically follow this pattern here, which is, again, you inscribe this data to the transaction input called data with the operation mint, the token protocol specification, and the number of inscriptions you are getting, or the tokens. Similarly, you can also transfer to users. So there are some examples there on top of the screen. You can list on some marketplaces. For instance, on ZK Sync, you have ZKS Market, as well as Bing Int. And you can also buy or sell through these marketplaces as well. So basically, when you list in a marketplace, you have to specify, of course, the protocol according to the definition on the deploy, the operation list, tick, as well as the amount of inscriptions you want to list, and the price in way, okay? Then, of course, in any data paper, we need data, right? So we were evaluating all these 5 transactions here. And in order to do that, we relied on 2 data sources mainly. For instance, for ZK Sync, we relied on an archive node or external node where we could gather all the transactions, blocks, transaction receipts, anything. And here is basically our pipeline. We could filter out these transactions using the tag that I showed before. And we stored these files in Parquet format, and those are the beautiful tools we use during our data science analytics. So here, notice that we also use spoilers, which allows a lot of beautiful things. So I can discuss this offline if you want. Also, we relied on Nansen query to get data regarding Arbitrum-based Ethereum optimism. Of course, anyone could deploy all the archive nodes related to this chain, but think about the computer infrastructure, right, and data space and whatever that you need. So sometimes it's just good to rely on some external tools as well, right? Given that you can prove that the data that they provide is actually accurate in terms of what you find on the chain. So with that, we obtained, here there are some statistics. For instance, we could identify 60 million inscriptions, transactions transactions related to inscriptions for Arbitrum, 70 million for ZK Sync era, and then here we have the unique number of issuers, the number of blocks in which they appeared. Clear there were a lot, right? So let's revisit the first plot I showed you about the transactions distribution. When is this coming to an end, right? Keep in mind that now we are in the future in comparison to before, so it's easy to spot on the plot. But think about in real time, right? It can get scary sometimes. So one thing we noticed here is basically on this plot, I show the fraction of or we can basically translate it to the percentage of inscriptions transactions in comparison to the total transactions in which chain. Clearly here, we can see that, for instance, around December, 96% of all Arbitrum as well as ZK Sync transactions were essentially inscriptions. Not 96%. And here, 50% Ethereum. Of course, we have some spike here for Arbitrum, for ZK Sync again. So clearly speaking, yeah, people were engaged in a lot of inscriptions, right? And let's then investigate what they were actually doing, right? So basically, regarding the top protocols that basically were that we saw on the blockchain, most of the chains here, they have their top protocol, but as ZK Sync, they have two mainly protocols, which is ERC20 and layer 220, right? And when we look at the type of operations that people use, of course, we would expect mint, right? Because basically, many users were minting, were deploying just one per token and protocol, right? But then, as you can see, there are mint and claim here. Keep in mind that they are kind of the same, right? It's basically the way that the protocol defines. Some of them define, hey, if you want to claim inscriptions, you just issue a JSON with an operation list, and the other, oh yeah, we use mint instead, but they are the same. And then regarding tokens are essentially a combination, right, of the token protocol as well as the tick, which is the name, because in each what they call protocol, you can have many tokens or ticks there. So here we see that again, there are top leading inscriptions tokens here for each of these chains. In Ethereum, it's a bit more balanced, but of course we have these ERC20 nodes here that basically have a spike, and there are all the others, they have less than 1.52% of all the inscriptions issued to Ethereum. ZK Sync, it's really interesting here because ERC20 Sync, it basically had almost 42%, while layer 220 L2 33%. So yeah, those two were the leading one in on ZK Sync. But then, what about the issues there? We see that, for instance, who are they, right? Are they bots? Are they normal users? One thing we noticed is that when we see here, basically here we see a table that shows the inscription transactions per issuer, which means that here we report the average. As you can see, the standard deviation is pretty high, which means that the data is really skewed. And the maximum amount is basically there was one issuer that issued, for instance, in Arbitrum 38,000 transactions to claim these inscriptions. On Ethereum, 67,000, while in ZK Sync 40K, which means that just a few accounts were basically claiming everything. And then, of course, it seems that they are bots, right? But yeah, we did not go through to identify whether they are actually bots or not. But come on, these are basically they use some code to make some automations, right? And about the amount of fees they were actually spending on this. Look how interesting it is. Here, basically, we report the distribution of fees per token, chain, operation, but clearly here we see on ZK Sync, only ERC20 Sync with the operation mint users or accounts, I guess it's better to call it than accounts, right? They spent alone almost 89 Ether in fees on a rollup, which is quite cheap to issue transactions. And if we sum up all those ZK Sync, these top operations and for these tokens for the casing here, clearly they have spent more than 100 Ether in fees, which is a lot of money, right? And then here we also report the median price that we had for each chain here. One thing we notice is that, yeah, due to the nature of a ZK rollup, basically ZK Sync saw a fee reduction because as we had a lot of transactions being included in a single batch, for instance, then, yeah, to compute the proofs, so basically for the end user in the end, they ended up paying less fees, okay? But in the end, of course, they together paid more than 100 fees only on ZK Sync. Then, what about the future of inscriptions? The thing is it good or bad actually, right? People might say, hey, this is basically, I don't know, I mean, this is maybe something that's not useful to the blockchain, but you know, but we also have to say that this, for the first time, was a real stress test for all the rollups. And if we want blockchain to scale, to basically have global adoption, we have to deal with this high flux of transactions. And we need, for instance, to onboard our parents, right? We need these things to do a better job in terms of scalability. Of course, there are a lot of solutions coming, and this is pretty awesome, right? And regarding the opportunity, so yeah, the thing is, you cannot basically exchange these token inscriptions for USDC, right? So because you don't have a smart contract, of course, you can propose some solution for that. Ownership of these inscriptions is kind of unsure. So the thing is, although these things are on the chain, you rely on some application or the inscriptions deployer to basically keep track of the account's balances. So one thing I can mention is that, okay, so if I issue a transaction with that pattern and issue another one from the web interface application of the inscriptions deployer, which one is actually going to be counted? The one that the application actually counted based because I issued through their platform, or the one that I basically issued on the chain? So for instance here, there is something that I tested regarding some inscriptions that were listed on one of these marketplaces, and basically I issued a buy operation there, and basically I bought some inscriptions, and so one thing I did, I tried to buy it again, the same listing, but I issued a transaction, and then guess what? Of course, I expect that, but it's just for a fun fact, is that, you know, I basically sent the money that the seller was asking twice, which means that, of course, my transaction wouldn't be reverted because there is no smart contract to check these conditions, right? So it was quite interesting. Then hype. So yeah, you know, sometimes we have some new tendencies happening on the blockchain. There are, for instance, pump fun on Solana, which is interesting as well to analyze. But then people get engaged on social media, Telegram, Discord groups, right? And one thing we noticed is that there was really high interest for users during the beginning of these trends, but it seems that it phased over time. And of course, as I mentioned, there is no mechanism that could impede or avoid you repurchasing a previously sold inscriptions, right? And of course, bots, as usual, they can basically take the lead and mint most of them. So for today, that's all I have to tell you, but of course, feel free to reach out to me or check out my other works available on my website. There are some talks available as well on YouTube. And of course, feel free to ask me anything, even offline, regarding the other works as well. With that, thank you so much for being here, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Johnnatan. I'm afraid we run out of time, so if you have any questions, if you can take them outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you.